Hey everyone, Dan Kane checking in from Brussels, Belgium. So much work has gone into getting us to this point, and we're so close. We're about 10 hours away from touching down in Freetown and Lungi, Sierra Leone. And we're just so excited, so eager. So much up to this point has gone into this, and now that we're just finally there, we're just so thrilled, so excited. However, this video is not going to be about, this trip. I want to talk a little bit about some of the experiences, some of the chapters or events in my life, the seasons in my life, that has kind of laid the foundation that the Lord has used to be able to develop my heart, help me grow in my conviction for the need of the gospel in countries like Sierra Leone, West Africa, and many other places. And so this video will be me sharing 6 different seasons or chapters of my life, some events of my life that has really laid the groundwork for this adventure that we're on right now. So I guess this video in some ways is answering the question, how did we get here? How did Sonia, how did Dan and our family, how do we get to the point where we are now choosing to leave our home in the U.S. and move to Sierra Leone, West Africa, in order to teach the gospel? Number 1, Alabama Leadership Camp. And so from ages 14 to 18 or 19, I spent 1 week each summer in Alabama with there's all men's intensive Bible study camp. And I just remember the first year that I went especially, it just blew my mind. Not only was this an intense week of Bible study, but every day...
Reminder, keep a distance of 1.5 meters, wash your hands often and always wear a face mask. This is how we protect each other's health.
Not only was this a week of intensive Bible studies, like 6 or 7 Bible studies per day, but every day after lunch, the entire camp would gather into this large pavilion, and we would hear for about an hour a man give a presentation regarding his experience of teaching the gospel and even living overseas. And that's just something that even from a young age of 14, 15, 16, hearing those things really moved me. Hearing the stories of conversion, hearing how people had changed had changed lives, hearing and seeing the effect of the gospel in different cultures really fascinated me and really convicted me to think about something like that, even at a young age. Number 2, spending time in Newcastle, Indiana, with a church at Newcastle, as well as with Phil Morgan. When I was 17 years old, the elders at Newcastle asked if I would be willing to work with them over the summer, kind of a longer period than summer, maybe 4 or 5, 6 months. And I'm so thankful they asked me to do that. I don't think I warranted something like that. But they were so willing to be able to help me out, be able to give me experience. Phil Morgan helped me out so much, learning how to be a good evangelist, be a good man. But one of the things that really influenced me is that Phil Morgan, around that time, began making yearly trips to the country of, you guessed it, Sierra Leone. And hearing from him, his experiences, his approach, hearing about the people, hearing all the details about these trips started getting me thinking about, one day I think I would want to go there. However, in the previous location, a man named Sewell Hall, the organizer of the leadership camp in Alabama, I remember him saying something. He said, "Preach at home before you preach at Rome." And to me that meant, do what you ought to do here in the U.S. before we feel like we need to go somewhere else. And so even though I heard about this when I was working with Phil Morgan when I was 17, I knew that I still had a lot of growing up to do myself. All right, period number 3 is my time in Morgantown, West Virginia. So after spending maybe 5 or 6 months in Newcastle, I then moved up, I was about 18 at this point, to Morgantown, West Virginia, to work with the church there and an evangelist named Alan Williamson. And during that period, there's some really special things that happened. Alan Williamson had spent several years of his life and his family living in Romania. And so that was something that he talked about often. I was able to pick his brain about the approach or some of the dangers and pitfalls of that. So that kept turning things in my mind, thinking about this. Secondly, and this is super small detail, but it was super influential to me, I remember him handing me a CD. And on that CD was a recorded sermon about world evangelism that Buddy Payne presented. I don't know where he presented it or how long ago it was, but he gave it to me. And him giving it to me communicated to me that that's something that he wanted me to think about. And just having someone who is older and wiser say, hey, young man, this is something I want you to consider and think about for your life, really influenced me. I don't think there's a sermon I listened to more frequently than that sermon in my entire life. And that really had an effect on me, thinking about, is this something I ought to do? I remember after listening to that sermon, being convicted in my heart regarding the need for the gospel in other places besides just here in the U.S. Period or season number 4 is my time in New Salisbury, Indiana. So immediately after my time in Morgantown, I moved to the small town of New Salisbury in southern Indiana, and I'm not gonna turn it any other way. I went there because Gary Fisher was there. Gary Fisher was one of the mentors that I met at the Alabama leadership camps, and he had spent several years in Brazil, and twice a year he goes about a month-long trips back to Brazil to strengthen and encourage the brethren there. And so he was very passionate about the need for those who are able to go take the gospel to difficult places, to hard places, and so that is always something that's been close to me through the different evangelists that I've spent time with, and so Gary Fisher especially. Period of my life number 5 that influenced me towards a decision like I'm making now to move to Sierra Leone is my decision to move to Boston, Massachusetts. So at this point, after kind of spending a few months or several months in each of these places, I decided I want to move to a place that would help prepare me for a future work overseas. And I thought maybe a place like a metropolitan area that didn't have a culture and a foundation of Christianity, that I'd be kind of starting from scratch, starting fresh, would give me a good experience. Moving to a place that had a more diverse culture would kind of give me a stepping stone for moving to a more, even more foreign culture in any other country I've moved to. And so with that, after doing some research, I decided to move to Boston, Massachusetts to help start and help develop a young congregation there in the center of the city. I really feel like in Boston, I was able to live out the advice of Sewell Hall: preach at home before you preach at Rome. It's really in Boston I felt like I was able to put all these pieces together that I had learned in these different locations and by these different men to really become who I felt like I ought to be, and also to become who I feel like I could then be helpful by moving overseas. And then the very last event in my life that really shaped me towards moving toward this goal was meeting Sonia, my now wife. Meeting Sonia was the most tremendous thing in my life, that's happened to me, besides becoming a Christian, for multiple reasons. But one of those reasons that pertains to our decision to move to Sierra Leone is that moving overseas, and I've heard this time and time again, is more difficult for the wife and for the woman than it is for men. The evangelists, the men that are going over there, we're doing the exact same thing there as we're doing here in the U.S. But for the women, the lifestyle, the chores, the tasks, the daily grind, it's so much different. The isolation even can be much more real. And so I knew that if I met a woman like Sonia, who would be interested and equally eager for work overseas, I can't hide that lamp. I got to use it. I can't dig it and bury it in the ground. When I met Sonia, saw her zeal and fervor, not just for preaching the gospel here in the U.S., but taking the gospel overseas, that was the final step, I think, to really catapult and kind of use as a trampoline for us then to make this decision to move to Africa. So that's my 6 foundational experiences and life events that have prepared me and really motivated me to make this choice to move to Sierra Leone.